the revelation on Mount Sinai. From the first day of the third month, the day on which Israel arrived at Mount Sinai, a heavy cloud rested upon them, and everyone except Moses was forbidden to ascend the mountain, yea, they durst not even stay near it, lest God smite those who pushed forward, with hail or fiery arrows. The day of the revelation announced itself as an ominous day even in the morning, for diverse rumblings sounded from Mount Sinai. Flashes of lightning, accompanied by an ever-swelling peal of horns, moved the people with mighty fear and trembling. God bent the heavens, moved the earth, and shook the bounds of the world, so that the depths trembled, and the heavens grew frightened. His splendor passed through the four portals of fire, earthquake, storm and hail. The kings of the earth trembled in their palaces, and they all came to the villain Balaam, and asked him if God intended the same fate for them as for the generation of the flood. But Balaam said to them, O ye fools! The Holy One, blessed be He, has long since promised Noah never again to punish the world with a flood. The kings of the heathen, however, were not quieted, and furthermore said, God has indeed promised never again to bring a flood upon the world, but perhaps He now means to destroy it by means of fire. Balaam said, Nay, God will not destroy the world either through fire or through water. The commotion throughout nature was caused through this only, that He is not about to bestow the Torah upon His people. The Eternal will give strength unto His people. At this all the kings shouted, May the Eternal bless His people with peace, and each one, quieted in spirit, went to his house. Just as the inhabitants of the earth were alarmed at the revelation, and believed the end of all time had arrived, so too did the earth. She thought the resurrection of the dead was about to take place, and she would have to account for the blood of the slain that she had absorbed, and for the bodies of the murdered whom she covered. The earth was not calmed until she heard the first words of the Decalogue. Although phenomena were perceptible on Mount Sinai in the morning, still God did not reveal Himself to the people until noon. For owing to the brevity of the summer nights, and the pleasantness of the morning sleep in summer, the people were still asleep when God had descended upon Mount Sinai. Moses betook himself to the encampment and awakened them with these words, Arise from your sleep, the bridegroom is at hand, and is waiting to lead his bride under the marriage canopy. Moses, at the head of the procession, hereupon brought the nation to its bridegroom, God, to Sinai, himself going up the mountain. 200. He said to God, Announce thy words, thy children are ready to obey them. These words of Moses rang out near and far, for on the occasion, his voice, when he repeated the words of God to the people, had as much power as the divine voice that he heard. It was not indeed quite of their own free will that Israel declared themselves ready to accept the Torah, for when the whole nation, in two divisions, men and women, approached Sinai, God lifted up this mountain and held it over the heads of the people like a basket, saying to them, If you accept the Torah, it is well, otherwise you will find your grave under this mountain. They all burst into tears and poured out their heart in contrition before God, and then said, All that the Lord hath said, will we do, and be obedient. Hardly had they uttered these words of submission to God, when 120 myriads of angels descended, and provided every Israelite with a crown and a girdle of glory, divine gifts, which they did not lose until they worshipped the golden calf, when the angels came and took the gifts away from them. At the same time with these crowns and girdles of glory, a heavenly radiance was shed over their faces, but this also they later lost through their sins. Only Moses retained it, whose face shone so brightly, that if even today a crack were made in his tomb, the light emanating from his corpse would be so powerful that it could not but destroy all the world. After God had bestowed upon Israel these wonderful gifts, He wanted to proceed to the announcement of the Torah, but did not desire to do so while Moses was with him, that the people might not say it was Moses who had spoken out of the cloud. Hence he sought an excuse to be rid of him. He therefore said to Moses, Go down, warn the people, that they shall not press forward to see, for if even one of them were to be destroyed, the loss to me would be as great as if all creation had been destroyed. Bid Nadab and Abihu also, as well as the firstborn that are to perform priestly duties, beware that they do not press forward. Moses, however, desirous of remaining with God, replied, I have already warned the people and set the bounds beyond which they may not venture. God hereupon said to Moses, Go, descend and call upon Aaron to come up with thee, but let him keep behind thee, while the people do not move beyond the positions thou hadst assigned them. Hardly had Moses left the mountain, when God revealed the Torah to the people. This was the sixth revelation of God upon earth since the creation of the world. The 10th and last is to take place on the day of judgment. The heavens opened and Mount Sinai, freed from the earth, rose into the air, so that its summit towered into the heavens, while a thick cloud covered the sides of it, and touched the feet of the divine throne. 206. Accompanying God on one side, appeared 22,000 angels with crowns for the Levites, the only tribe that remained true to God while the rest worshipped the golden calf. On the second side were 60 myriads, 3,550 angels, each bearing a crown of fire for each individual Israelite. Double this number of angels was on the third side, whereas on the fourth side they were simply innumerable. For God did not appear from one direction, but from all four simultaneously, which, however, did not prevent his glory from filling the heaven as well as all the earth. In spite of these innumerable hosts of angels there was no crowding on Mount Sinai, no mob. There was room for all the angels that had appeared in honor of Israel in the Torah. They had, however, at the same time received the order to destroy Israel in case they intended to reject the Torah. The first commandment. The first word of God on Sinai was Anoki, it is I. It was not a Hebrew word, but an Egyptian word that Israel first heard from God. He treated them as did that king his homecoming son, whom, returning from a long stay overseas, he addressed in the language the son had acquired in a foreign land. So God addressed Israel in Egyptian, because it was the language they spoke. At the same time Israel recognized in this word Anoki, that it was God who addressed them. For when Jacob had assembled his children around his deathbed, he warned them to be mindful of the glory of God, and confided to them the secrets that God would hereafter reveal to them with the word Anoki. He said, with the word Anoki he addressed my grandfather Abraham. With the word Anoki he addressed my father Isaac, and with the word Anoki he addressed me. Know, then, that when he will come to you, and will so address you, it will be he, but not otherwise. When the first commandment had come out of the mouth of God, thunder and lightning proceeded from his mouth, a torch was at his right, and a torch at his left, and his voice flew through the air, saying, my people, house of Israel. I am the Eternal, you God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt. When Israel heard the awful voice, they flew back in their horror 12 miles, until their souls fled from them. Upon this the Torah turned to God, saying, Lord of the world, hast thou given me to the living, or to the dead? God said, to the living. The Torah, but they are all dead. God, for thy sake will I restore them to life. Hereupon he let fall upon them the dew that will hereafter revive the dead, and they return to life. The trembling of heaven and earth that set in upon the perception of the divine voice, alarmed Israel so greatly that they could hardly stand on their feet. God hereupon sent to every one of them 2 angels. On lay his hand upon the heart of each, that his soul might not depart, and on to lift the head of each, that he might behold his Maker's splendor. They beheld the glory of God as well as the otherwise invisible word when it emanated from the divine vision, and rolled forward to their ears, whereupon they perceived these words, Wilt thou accept the Torah, which contains 248 commandments, corresponding to the number of the members of thy body? They answered, Yea, yea. Then the word passed from the ear to the mouth. It kissed the mouth, then rolled again to the ear, again to the ear, and called to it, Wilt thou accept the Torah, which contains 365 prohibitions, corresponding to the days of the year? And when they replied, Yea, yea, again the word turned from the ear to the mouth and kissed it. After the Israelites had in this wise taken upon themselves the commandments and the prohibitions, God opened the 7 heavens and the 7 earths, and said, Behold, these are my witnesses that there is none like me in the heights or on earth. See that I am the only one, and that I have revealed myself in my splendor and my radiance. If anyone should say to you, Go, serve other gods, then say, Can one who has seen his Maker, face to face, in his splendor, in his glory and his strength, leave him and become an idolater? See, it is I that have delivered you out of the house of bondage. It is I that cleaved the seas before you and led you on dry land, while I submerged you enemies in the depths. I am the God of the dry land as well as the sea, of the past as well as of the future, the God of this world as well as of the future worlds. I am the God of all nations, but only with Israel is my name allied. If they fulfill my wishes, I, the Eternal, am merciful, gracious and long-suffering, and abundant in goodness and truth. But if you are disobedient, then will I be a stern judge. If you had not accepted the Torah, no punishment could have fallen upon you were you not to fulfill it, but now that you have accepted it, you must obey it. In order to convince Israel of the unity and uniqueness of God, he bade all nature stand still, that all might see that there is nothing beside him. When God bestowed the Torah, no bird sang, no ox lowed, the Ophanim did not fly, the seraphim uttered not their holy, 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 the sea did not roar, no creature uttered a sound, all listened in breathless silence to the words announced by an echoless voice, I am the Lord your God. These words as well as the others, made known by God on Mount Sinai, were not heard by Israel alone, but by the inhabitants of all the earth. The divine voice divided itself into the 70 tongues of men, so that all might understand it. But whereas Israel could listen to the voice without suffering harm, the souls of the heathens almost fled from them when they heard it. When the divine voice sounded, all the dead in Sheol were revived, and betook themselves to Sinai. For the revelation took place in the presence of the living as well as of the dead, yea, even the souls of those who were not yet born were present. Every prophet, every sage, received at Sinai his share of the revelation, which in the course of history was announced by them to mankind. All heard indeed the same words, but the same voice, corresponding to the individuality of each, was God's way of speaking with them. And as the same voice sounded differently to each one, so did the divine vision appear differently to each, wherefore God warned them not to ascribe the various forms to various beings, saying, Do not believe that because you have seen me in various forms, there are various gods. I am the same that appeared to you at the Red Sea as a God of war, and at Sinai as a teacher. 216. The other commandments revealed on Sinai. After Israel had accepted the first commandment with a yea, God said, As you have now acknowledged me as your sovereign, I can now give you commands. Thou shalt not acknowledge the gods of other nations as such, for they bring no advantage to those who adore them. This thou shalt not do while I exist. I have given you my Torah in order to lend sovereignty to you, hence you must not kindle my wrath by breaking my covenant through idolatry. You shall not worship dead idols, but him who kills and restores to life, and in whose hand are all living things. Do not learn the works of other nations, for their works are vanity. I, the Eternal, your God, rule over zeal and am not ruled by it. I wait until the 4th generation to visit punishment. But those who love me, or fear me, will I reward even unto the 1000th generation. When Moses heard these words, according to which God would visit upon the descendants the sins of their fathers only if the consecutive generations were one after another sinful, he cast himself upon the ground and thanked God for it. For he knew it never occurred among Israel that 3 consecutive generations were sinful. The 3rd commandment read, O my people of Israel, none among you shall call the name of the Lord in vain, for he who swears falsely by the name of the Lord shall not go unpunished on the great judgment day. 218. Swearing falsely has terrible consequences not only for the one who does it, but it endangers all the world. For when God created the world, he laid over the abyss a shard, on which is engraved the ineffable name, that the abyss may not burst forth and destroy the world. But as often as one swears falsely in God's name, the letters of the ineffable name fly away, and as there is then nothing to restrain the abyss, the waters burst forth from it to destroy the world. This would surely come to pass, if God did not send the angel Israel, who has charge of the 70 pencils, to engrave anew the ineffable name on the shard. God said then to Israel, If you accept my Torah and observe my laws, I will give you for all eternity a thing most precious that I have in my possession. And what, replied Israel, is that precious thing which thou wilt give us if we obey thy Torah? God, the future world. Israel, but even in this world should we have a foretaste of that other. God, the Sabbath will give you this foretaste. Be mindful of the Sabbath on the seventh day of the creation of the world. For when the world was created, the seventh day came before God, and said to him, All that thou hast created is in couples, why not I? Whereupon God replied, The community of Israel shall be thy spouse. Of this promise that God had made to the 70th day, he reminded the people on Mount Sinai, when he gave them the fourth commandment, to keep the Sabbath holy. When the nations of the earth heard the first commandment, they said, There is no king that does not like to see himself acknowledged as sovereign, and just so does God desire his people to pledge unto him their allegiance. At the second commandment they said, No king suffers a king beside himself, nor does the God of Israel. At the third commandment they said, Is there a king that would like to have people swear false oaths by his name? At the fourth commandment they said, No king dislikes to see his birthday celebrated. But when the people heard the fifth commandment, Honor thy father and thy mother, they said, According to our laws, if a man enrolls himself as a servant of the king, he thereby disowns his parents. God, however, makes it a duty to honor father and mother. Truly, for this is honor due to him. It was with these words that the fifth commandment was emphasized, Honor thy parents to whom thou owest existence, as thou honorest me. Honor the body that bore thee, and the breasts that gave thee suck. Maintain thy parents, for thy parents took part in thy creation. For man owes his existence to God, to his father, and to his mother, in that he receives from each of his parents 5 of the parts of his body, and 10 from God. The bones, the veins, the nails, the brain, and the white of the eye come from the father. The mother gives him skin, flesh, blood, hair, and the pupil of the eye. God gives him the following: breath, soul, light of countenance, sight, hearing, speech, touch, sense, insight, and understanding. When a human being honors his parents, God says, I consider it as if I had dwelled among men and they had honored me. But if people do not honor their parents, God say, It is good that I do not dwell among men, or they would have treated me superciliously, too. God not only commanded to love and fear parents as himself, but in some respects he places the honor due to parents even higher than that due him. A man is only then obliged to support the poor or to perform certain religious ceremonies, if he has the wherewithal, but it is the duty of each one even to go begging at men's doors, if he cannot otherwise maintain his parents. The sixth commandment said, O my people Israel, be no slayers of men, do not associate with murderers, and shun their companionship, that your children may not learn the craft of murder. As a penalty for deeds of murder, God will send a devastating war over mankind. There are 2 divisions in Sheol, an inner and an outer. In the latter are all those who were slain before their time. There they stay until the course of the time predestined them is run. And every time a murder has been committed, God says, Who has slain this person and has forced me to keep him in the outer Sheol, so that I must appear unmerciful to have removed him from earth before his time. On the judgment day the slain will appear before God, and will implore him, O Lord of the world. Thou hast formed me, thou hast developed me, thou hast been gracious unto me while I was in the womb, so that I left it unharmed. Thou in thy great mercy hast provided for me. O Lord of all worlds, grant me satisfaction from this villain that knew no pity for me. Then God's wrath will be kindled against the murderer, into Gehenna will he throw him and damn him for all eternity, while the slain will see satisfaction given him, and be glad. The 7th commandment says, O my people of Israel, be not adulterers, nor the accomplices or companions of adulterers, that your children after you may not be adulterers. Commit no unchaste deeds, with your hands, feet, eyes, or ears, for as a punishment therefore the plague will come over the world. This is the 8th commandment, be not thief, nor the accomplice or companion of thieves, that your children may not become thieves. As a penalty for robbery and theft famine will come upon the world. God may forgive idolatry, but never theft, and he is always ready to listen to complaints against forgers and robbers. The 9th commandment reads, O my people of Israel, Bear not false witness against your companions, for in punishment for this the clouds will scatter, so that there may be no rain, and famine will ensue owing to drought. God is particularly severe with a false witness because falsehood is the one quality that God did not create, but is something that man themselves produces. The content of the 10th commandment is, O my people Israel, covet not the possessions of your neighbors, for owing to this sin will the government take their possessions from the people, so that even the wealthiest will become poor and will have to go into exile. The 10th commandment is directed against a sin that sometimes leads to a trespassing of all the 10 commandments. If a man covets his neighbor's wife and commits adultery, he neglects the first commandment, I am the Eternal, thy God, for he commits his crime in the dark and thinks that none sees him, not even the Lord, whose eyes float over all the world, and see good as well as evil. He oversteps the second commandment, Thou shalt not have strange gods besides me. I am a jealous God, who is wroth against faithlessness, whether towards me, or toward men. He breaks the third commandment, Thou shalt not take the name of the Lord in vain, for he swears he has not committed adultery, but he did so. He is the cause of profanation of the Sabbath, the consecration of which God commands in the fourth commandment, because in his illegal relation he generates descendants who will perform priestly duties in the temple on the Sabbath, which, being bastards, they have no right to do. The fifth commandment will be broken by the children of the adulterer, who will honor as a father a strange man, and will not even know their true father. He breaks the sixth commandment, Thou shalt not kill, if he is surprised by the rightful husband, for every time a man goes to a strange woman, he does so with the consciousness that this may lead to his death or the death of his neighbor. The trespassing of the seventh commandment, Thou shalt not commit adultery, is the direct outcome of a forbidden coveting. The eighth commandment, Thou shalt not steal, is broken by the adulterer, for he steals another man's fountain of happiness. The ninth commandment, Thou shalt not bear false witness, is broken by the adulterous woman, who pretends that the fruit of her criminal relations is the child of her husband. In this way, the breaking of the 10th commandment has not only led to all the other sins, but has also the evil effect that the deceived husband leaves his whole property to one who is not his son, so that the adulterer robs him of his possessions as well as of his wife. The unity of the 10 commandments. The 10 commandments are so closely interwoven, that the breaking of one leads to the breaking of another. But there is a particularly strong bond of union between the first 5 commandments, which are written on one table, and the last 5, which were on the other table. The first commandment, I am the Lord, thy God, corresponds to the 6th, Thou shalt not kill, for the murderer slays the image of God. The second, Thou shalt have no strange gods before me, corresponds to the 7th, Thou shalt not commit adultery, for conjugal faithlessness is as grave a sin as idolatry, which is faithlessness to God. The third commandment, Thou shalt not take the name of the Lord in vain, corresponds to the 8th, Thou shalt not steal, for theft leads to false oath. The fourth commandment, Remember the Sabbath day, to keep it holy, corresponds to the 9th, Thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbor, for he who bears false witness against his neighbor commits as grave a sin as if he had borne false witness against God, saying that he had not created the world in 6 days and rested on the 7th, the Sabbath. The fifth commandment, Honor thy father and thy mother, corresponds to the 10th, Covet not thy neighbor's wife, for one who indulges this lust produces children who will not honor their true father, but will consider a stranger their father. The 10 commandments, which God first revealed on Mount Sinai, correspond in their character to the 10 words of which he had made use at the creation of the world. The first commandment, I am the Lord, thy God, corresponds to the first word at the creation, Let there be light, for God is the eternal light. The second commandment, Thou shalt have no strange gods before me, corresponds to the second word, Let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, and let it divide the waters from the waters. For God said, Choose between me and the idols. Between me, the fountain of living waters, and the idols, the stagnant waters. The third commandment, Thou shalt not take the name of thy God in vain, corresponds to the word, Let the waters be gathered together, for as little as water can be gathered in a cracked vessel, so can a man maintain his possession which he has obtained through false oaths. The fourth commandment, remember to keep the Sabbath holy, corresponds to the word, let the earth bring forth grass, for he who truly observes the Sabbath will receive good things from God without having to labor for them, just as the earth produces grass that need not be sown. For at the creation of man it was God's intention that he be free from sin, immortal, and capable of supporting himself by the products of the soil without toil. The fifth commandment, honor thy father and thy mother, corresponds to the word, let there be light in the firmament of the heaven, for God said to man, I gave thee two lights, thy father and thy mother, treat them with care. The sixth commandment, thou shalt not kill, corresponds to the word, let the waters bring forth abundantly the moving creature, for God said, be not like the fish, among whom the great swallow the small. The seventh commandment, thou shalt not commit adultery, corresponds to the word, let the earth bring forth the living creature after his kind, for God said, I chose for thee a spouse, abide with her. The eighth commandment, thou shalt not steal, corresponds to the word, behold, I have given you every herb-bearing seed, for none, said God, should touch his neighbor's goods, but only that which grows free as the grass, which is the common property of all. The ninth commandment, thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbor, corresponds to the word, let us make man in our image. Thou, like thy neighbor, art made in my image, hence bear not false witness against thy neighbor. The 10th commandment, thou shalt not covet the wife of thy neighbor, corresponds to the 10th word of the creation, it is not good for man to be alone, for God said, I created thee a spouse, and let not one among ye covet his neighbor's wife. Moses chosen as intermediator. After Israel had heard the 10 commandments, they supposed that God would on this occasion reveal to them all the rest of the Torah. But the awful vision on Mount Sinai, where they heard the visible and saw the audible, the privilege was granted them that even the slave women among them saw more than the greatest prophet of later times. This vision has so exhausted them that they would surely have perished, had they heard another word from God. They therefore went to Moses and implored him to be the intermediator between them and God. God found their wish right, so that he not only employed Moses as his intermediator, but determined in all future times to send prophets to Israel as messengers of his words. Turning to Moses, God said, all that they have spoken is good. If it were possible, I would even now dismiss the angel of death, but death against humanity has already been decreed by me, hence it must remain. Go, say unto them, return to your tents, but stay thou with me. In these words God indicated to Israel that they might again enter upon conjugal relations, from which they has abstained throughout 3 days, while Moses should forever have to deny himself all earthly indulgences. Moses in his great wisdom now knew how, in a few words, to calm the great excitement of the myriads of men, saying to them, God gave you the Torah and wrought marvels for you, in order, through this and through the observances of the laws which he imposed upon you, to distinguish you before all other nations on earth. Consider, however, that whereas up to this time you have been ignorant, and your ignorance served as your excuse, you now know exactly what to do and what not to do. Until now you did not know that the righteous are to be rewarded and the godless to be punished in the future world, but now you know it. But as long as you will have a feeling of shame, you will not lightly commit sins. Hereupon the people withdrew 12 miles from Mount Sinai, while Moses stepped quite close before the Lord. In the immediate proximity of God are the souls of the pious, a little farther mercy and justice, and close to these was the position Moses was allowed to occupy. The vision of Moses, owing to his nearness to God, was clear and distinct, unlike that of the other prophets, who saw but dimly. He is furthermore distinguished from all the other prophets, that he was conscious of his prophetic revelations, while they were unconscious in the moments of prophecy. A third distinction of Moses, which he indeed shared with Aaron and Samuel, was that God revealed himself to him in a pillar of cloud. In spite of these great marks of favor to Moses, the people still perceive the difference between the first 2 commandments, which they heard directly from God, and those that they learned through Moses' intercession. For when they heard the words, I am the Eternal, thy Lord, the understanding of the Torah became deep-rooted in their hearts, so that they never forgot what they thus learned. But they forgot some of the things Moses taught, for as man is a being of flesh and blood, and hence ephemeral, so are his teachings ephemeral. They hereupon came to Moses, saying, "Oh, if he would only reveal himself once more! Oh, that once more he would kiss us with the kisses of his mouth! Oh, that understanding of the Torah might remain firm in our hearts as before!" Moses answered, "It is no longer possible now, but it will come to pass in the future world, when he will put his law in their inward parts, and write it in their hearts." Israel had another reason for regretting the choice of an intermediator between themselves and God. When they heard the second commandment, "Thou shalt have no strange gods beside me," the evil impulse was torn out from their hearts. But as soon as they requested Moses to intercede for them, the evil impulse set in once more in its old place. In vain, however, did they plead with Moses to restore the former direct communication between them and God, so that the evil impulse might be taken from them. For he said, "It is no longer possible now, but in the future world he will take out of your flesh the stony heart." Although Israel had now heard only the first two commandments directly from God, still the divine apparition had an enormous influence upon this generation. Never in the course of their lives was any physical impurity heard of among them, nor did any vermin succeed in infesting their bodies, and when they died, their corpses remained free from worms and insects. Moses and the angels strive for the Torah. The day on which God revealed himself on Mount Sinai was twice as long as ordinary days. For on that day the sun did not set, a miracle that was 4 times more repeated for Moses' sake. When this long day had drawn to its close, Moses ascended the holy mountain, where he spent a week to rid himself of all mortal impurity, so that he might betake himself to God into heaven. At the end of his preparations, God called him to come to him. Then a cloud appeared and lay down before him, but he knew not whether to ride upon it or merely to hold fast to it. Then suddenly the mouth of the cloud flew open, and he entered into it, and walked about in the firmament as a man walks about on earth. Then he met Kemuel, the porter, the angel who is in charge of 12,000 angels of destruction, who are posted at the portals of the firmament. He spoke harshly to Moses, saying, "What dost thou here, son of Amram, on this spot, belonging to the angels of fire?" Moses answered, "Not of my own impulse do I come here, but with the permission of the Holy One, to receive the Torah and bear it down to Israel." As Kemuel did not want to let him pass, Moses struck him and destroyed him out of the world, whereupon he went on his way until the angel Hadarniel came along. This angel is 60 myriads of parasangs taller than his fellows, and at every word that passes out of his mouth, issue 12,000 fiery lightning flashes. When he beheld Moses he roared at him, "What dost thou here, son of Amram, here on the spot of the holy and high?" When Moses heard his voice, he grew exceedingly frightened, his eyes shed tears, and soon he would have fallen from the cloud. But instantly the pity of God for Moses was awakened, and he said to Hadarniel, "You angels have been quarrelsome since the day I created you. In the beginning, when I wanted to create Adam, you raised complaint before me and said, 'What is man that thou art mindful of him?' And my wrath was kindled against you and I burned scores of you with my little finger. Now again ye commence strife with the faithful one of my house, whom I have bidden to come up here to receive the Torah and carry it down to my chosen children Israel, although you know that if Israel did not receive the Torah, you would no longer be permitted to dwell in heaven." When Hadarniel heard this, he said quickly to the Lord, "O Lord of the world! It is manifest and clear to thee, that I was not aware he came hither with thy permission, but since I now know it, I will be his messenger and go before him as a disciple before his master." Hadarniel hereupon, in a humble attitude, ran before Moses as a disciple before his master, until he reached the fire of Sandalphon, when he spoke to Moses, saying, "Go, turn about, for I may not stay in this spot, or the fire of Sandalphon will scorch me." This angel towers above his fellows by so great height, that it would take 500 years to cross over it. He stands behind the divine throne and binds garlands for his Lord. Sandalphon does not know the abiding spot of the Lord either, so that he might set the crown on his head, but he charms the crown, so that it rises of its own accord until it reposes on the head of the Lord. As soon as Sandalphon bids the crown rise, The hosts on high tremble and shake, the holy animals burst into paeans, the holy seraphim roar like lions and say, Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts, the whole earth is full of his glory. When the crown has reached the throne of glory, the wheels of the throne are instantly set in motion, the foundations of its footstool tremble, and all the heavens are seized with trembling and horror. As soon as the crown now passes the throne of glory, to settle upon its place, all the heavenly hosts open their mouths, saying, Praised be the glory of the Eternal from his place. And when the crown has reached its destination, all the holy animals, the seraphim, the wheels of the throne, and the hosts on high, the cherubim and the hashmallim speak with one accord, The Eternal is King, the Eternal was King, the Eternal will be King in all eternity. Now when Moses beheld Sandalphon, he was frightened, and in his alarm came near to falling out of the cloud. In tears he imploringly begged God for mercy, and was answered. In his bountiful love of Israel, he himself descended from the throne of his glory and stood before Moses, until he had passed the flames of Sandalphon. After Moses had passed Sandalphon, he ran across Gibeon, the stream of fire, the coals of which burn the angels, who dip into them every morning, are burned, and then arise anew. This stream with the coals of fire is generated beneath the throne of glory out of the perspiration of the holy Hayat, who perspire fire out of fear of God. God, however, quickly drew Moses past Gibeon without his suffering any injury. As he passed on he met the angel Galizer, also called Raziel. He it is who reveals the teachings to his Maker, and makes known in the world what is decreed by God. For he stands behind the curtains that are drawn before the throne of God, and sees and hears everything. Elijah on Horeb hears that which Raziel calls down into the world, and passes his knowledge on. This angel performs other functions in heaven. He stands before the throne with outspread wings, and in this way arrests the breath of the Hayat, the heat of which would otherwise scorch all the angels. He furthermore puts the coals of Gibeon into a glowing brazier, which he holds up to kings, lords, and princes, and from which their faces receive a radiance that makes men fear them. When Moses beheld him, he trembled, but God led him past unhurt. He then came to a host of angels of terror that surround the throne of glory, and are the strongest and mightiest among the angels. These now wished to scorch Moses with their fiery breath, but God spread his radiance of splendor over Moses, and said to him, Hold on tight to the throne of my glory, and answer them. For as soon as the angels became aware of Moses in heaven, they said to God, What does he who is born of woman here? And God's answer was as follows, He has come to receive the Torah. They furthermore said, O Lord, content thyself with the celestial beings, let them have the Torah, what wouldst thou with the dwellers of the dust? Moses hereupon answered the angels, It is written in the Torah, I am the Eternal, thy Lord, that have led thee out of the land of Egypt and out of the house of bondage. Were ye perchance enslaved in Egypt and then delivered, that ye are in need of the Torah? It is further written in the Torah, Thou shalt have no other gods. Are there perchance idolaters among ye, that ye are in need of the Torah? It is written, Thou shalt not utter the name of the Eternal, thy God, in vain. Are there perchance business negotiations among ye, that ye are in need of the Torah to teach you the proper form of invocation? It is written, Remember to keep the Sabbath holy. Is there perchance any work among you, that ye are in need of the Torah? It is written, Honor thy father and thy mother. Have ye perchance parents, that ye are in need of the Torah? It is written, Thou shalt not kill. Are there perchance murderers among ye, that ye are in need of the Torah? It is written, Thou shalt not commit adultery. Are there perchance women among ye, that ye are in need of the Torah? It is written, Thou shalt not steal. Is there perchance money in heaven, that ye are in need of the Torah? It is written, Thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbor. Is there perchance any false witness among ye, that ye are in need of the Torah? It is written, Covet not the house of thy neighbor. Are there perchance houses, fields, or vineyards among ye, that ye are in need of the Torah? The angels hereupon relinquished their opposition to the delivering of the Torah into the hands of Israel, and acknowledged that God was right to reveal it to mankind, saying, Eternal, our Lord, how excellent is thy name in all the earth. who hast set thy glory upon the heavens. Moses now stayed 40 days in heaven to learn the Torah from God. But when he started to descend and beheld the hosts of the angels of terror, angels of trembling, angels of quaking, and angels of horror, then through his fear he forgot all he had learned. For this reason God called the angel Epiphiah, the prince of the Torah, who handed over to Moses the Torah, ordered in all things and sure. All the other angels, too, became his friends, and each bestowed upon him a remedy as well as the secret of the holy names, as they are contained in the Torah, and as they are applied. Even the angel of death gave him a remedy against death. The applications of the holy names, which the angels through Epiphiah, the prince of the Torah, and Metatron, the prince of the face, taught him, Moses passed on to the high priest Eleazar, who passed them to his son Phinehas, also known as Elijah. 248. Moses receives the Torah. When Moses reached heaven, he found God occupied ornamenting the letters in which the Torah was written, with little crown-like decorations, and he looked on without saying a word. God then said to him, In thy home, do not people know the greeting of peace? Moses, does it behoove a servant to address his master? God, thou mightest at least have wished me success in my labors. Moses hereupon said, Let the power of my Lord be great according as thou hast spoken. Then Moses inquired as the significance of the crowns upon the letter, and was answered, Hereafter there shall live a man called Akiba, son of Joseph, who will base in interpretation a gigantic mountain of halakot upon every dot of these letters. Moses said to God, Show me this man. God, go back 18 ranks. Moses went where he was bidden, and could hear the discussions of the teacher sitting with his disciples in the 18th rank, but was not able to follow these discussions, which greatly grieved him. But just then he heard the disciples questioning their master in regard to a certain subject, Whence dost thou know this? And he answered, This is a halakha given to Moses on Mount Sinai. And not Moses was content. Moses returned to God and said to him, Thou hast a man like Akiba, and yet dost thou give the Torah to Israel through me. But God answered, Be silent, so has it been decreed by me. Moses then said, O Lord of the world, thou hast permitted me to behold this man's learning, let's see also the reward which will be meted out to him. God said, Go, return and see. Moses saw them sell the flesh of the martyr Akiba at the meat market. He said to God, Is this the reward for such erudition? But God replied, Be silent, thus have I decreed. Moses then saw how God wrote the word long-suffering in the Torah, and asked, Does this mean that thou hast patience with the pious? But God answered, Nay, with sinners also am I long-suffering. What? Exclaimed Moses, Let the sinners perish. God said no more, but when Moses implored God's mercy, begging him to forgive the sin of the people of Israel, God answered him, Thou thyself didst advise me to have no patience with sinners and to destroy them. Yea, said Moses, but thou didst declare that thou art long-suffering with sinners also, let now the patience of the Lord be great according as thou hast spoken. The 40 days that Moses spent in heaven were entirely devoted to the study of the Torah. He learned the written as well as the oral teaching, yea, even the doctrines that an able scholar would someday propound were revealed to him. He took an especial delight in hearing the teachings of the Tana Rabbi Eleazar, and received the joyful message that this great scholar would be one of his descendants. The study of Moses was so planned for the 40 days, that by day God studied with him the written teachings, and by night the oral. In this way was he enabled to distinguish between night and day, for in heaven the night shineth as the day. There were other signs also by which he could distinguish night from day. For if he heard the angels praise God with Holy, 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 is the Lord of hosts, he knew that it was day. But if they praised him with Blessed be the Lord to whom blessing is due, he knew it was night. Then, too, if he saw the sun appear before God and cast itself down before him, he knew that it was night. If, however, the moon and the stars cast themselves at his feet, he knew that it was day. He could also tell time by the occupation of the angels, for by day they prepared manna for Israel, and by night they sent it down to earth. The prayers he heard in heaven served him as another token whereby he might know the time, for if he heard the recitation of the Shema precede prayer, he knew that it was day, but if the prayer preceded the recitation of the Shema, then it was night. During his stay with him, God showed Moses all the 7 heavens, and the celestial temple, and the 4 colors that he was to employ to fit up the tabernacle. Moses found it difficult to retain the color, whereupon God said to him, "Turn to the right," and as he turned, he saw a host of angels in garments that had the color of the sea. "This," said God, "is violet." Then he bade Moses turn to the left, and there he saw angels dressed in red, and God said, "This is royal purple." Moses hereupon turned around to the rear, and saw angels robed in a color that was neither purple nor violet, and God said to him, "This color is crimson." Moses then turned about and saw angels robed in white, and God said to him, "This is the color of twisted linen." Although Moses now devoted both night and day to the study of the Torah, he still learned nothing, for hardly had he learned something from God when he forgot it again. Moses thereupon said to God, "O Lord of the world, 40 days have I devoted to studying the Torah, without having profited anything by it." God therefore bestowed the Torah upon Moses, and now he could descend to Israel, for now he remembered all that he had learned. Hardly had Moses descended from heaven with the Torah, when Satan appeared before the Lord and said, "Where, forsooth, is the place where the Torah is kept?" For Satan knew nothing of the revelation of God on Sinai, as God had employed him elsewhere on purposes, that he might not appear before him as an accuser, saying, "Wilt thou give the Torah to a people that 40 days later will worship the golden calf?" In answer to Satan's question regarding the whereabouts of the Torah, God said, "I gave the Torah to earth." To earth, then, Satan betook himself with his query, "Where is the Torah?" Earth said, "God knows of its course, he knoweth its abiding place, for he looketh to the ends of the earth, and seeth unto the whole heaven." Satan now passed on to the sea to seek for the Torah, but the sea also says, "It is not with me," and the abyss said, "It is not in me." Destruction and death said, "We have heard the fame thereof with our ears." Satan now returned to God and said, "O Lord of the world, everywhere have I sought the Torah, but I found it not." God replied, "Go, seek the son of Amram." Satan now hastened to Moses and asked him, "Where is the Torah that God hath given thee?" Whereupon Moses answered, "Who am I, that the Holy One, blessed be he, should have given me the Torah?" God hereupon spoke to Moses, "O Moses, thou utterest a falsehood." But Moses answered, "O Lord of the world, thou hast in thy possession a hidden treasure that daily delights thee. Dare I presume to declare it my possession?" Then God said, "As a reward for thy humility, the Torah shall be named for thee, and it shall henceforth be known as the Torah of Moses." Moses departed from the heavens with the 2 tables on which the 10 commandments were engraved, and just the words of it are by nature divine, so too are the tables on which they are engraved. These were created by God's own hand in the dusk of the first Sabbath at the close of the creation, and were made of a sapphire-like stone. On each of the 2 tables are the 10 commandments, 4 times repeated, and in such wise were they engraved that the letters were legible on both sides, for, like the tables, the writing and the pencils for inscription, too, were of heavenly origin. Between the separate commandments were noted down all the precepts of the Torah in all their particulars, although the tables were not more than 6 hands in length and as much in width. It is another of the attributes of the tables, that although they are fashioned out of the hardest stone, they can still be rolled up like a scroll. When God handed the tables to Moses, he seized them by the top third, whereas Moses took hold of the bottom third, but on third remained open, and it was in this way that the divine radiance was shed upon Moses' face. The golden calf. When God revealed himself upon Mount Sinai, all Israel sang a song of jubilation to the Lord, for their faith in God was on this occasion without bounds and unexampled, except possibly at the time of the Messiah, when they likewise will cherish this firm faith. The angels, too, rejoiced with Israel, only God was downcast on this day and sent his voice out of thickest darkness, in token of his sorrow. The angels hereupon said to God, "Is not the joy that thou hast created thine?" But God replied, "You do not know what the future will bring." He knew that 40 days later Israel would give the lie to the words of God, "Thou shalt have no other gods before me," and would adore the golden calf. And truly, God had sufficient cause to grow sad at this thought, for the worship of the golden calf had more disastrous consequences for Israel than any other of their sins. God had resolved to give life everlasting to the nation that would accept the Torah, hence Israel upon accepting the Torah gained supremacy over the angel of death. But they lost this power when they worshipped the golden calf. As a punishment for this, their sin, they were doomed to study the Torah in suffering and bondage, in exile and unrest, amid cares of life and burdens, until, in the Messianic time and in the future world, God will compensate them for all their sufferings. But until that time there is no sorrow that falls to Israel's lot that is not in part a punishment for their worship of the golden calf. Strange as it may seem that Israel should set out to worship this idol at the very time when God was busied with the preparation of the 2 tables of the law, still the following circumstances are to be considered. When Moses departed from the people to hasten to God to receive the Torah, he said to them, 40 days from today I will bring you the Torah. But at noon on the 40th day Satan came, and with a wizard's trick conjured up for the people a vision of Moses lying stretched out dead on a bier that floated midway between earth and heaven. Pointing to it with their fingers, they cried, "This is the man Moses that brought us up out of the land of Egypt." 264. Under the leadership of the magicians Jannes and Jambres, they appeared before Aaron, saying, "The Egyptians were wont to carry their gods about with them, to dance and play before them, that each might be able to behold as gods. And now we desire that thou shouldst make us a god such as the Egyptians had." When Hur, the son of Miriam, whom Moses during his absence had appointed joint leader of the people with Aaron, owing to his birth which placed him among the notables of highest rank, beheld this, he said to them, "O ye frivolous ones, you are no longer mindful of the many miracles God wrought for you." In their wrath, the people slew this pious and noble man. And, pointing out his dead body to Aaron, they said to him threateningly, "If thou wilt make us a god, it is well, if not we will dispose of thee as of him." Aaron had no fear for his life, but he thought, if Israel were to commit so terrible a sin as to slay their priest and prophet, God would never forgive them. He was willing rather to take a sin upon himself than to cast the burden of so wicked a deed upon the people. He therefore granted them their wish to make them a god, but he did it in such a way that he still cherished the hope that this thing might not come to pass. Hence he demanded from them not their own ornaments for the fashioning of the idol, but the ornaments of their wives, their sons, and their daughters, thinking, if I were to tell them to bring me gold and silver, they would immediately do so, hence I will demand the earrings of their wives, their sons, and their daughters, that through their refusal to give up their ornaments, the matter might come to naught. But Aaron's assumption was only in part true. The women indeed did firmly refuse to give up their jewels for the making of a monster that is of no assistance to his worshippers. As a reward for this, God gave the new moons as holidays to women, and in the future world too they will be rewarded for their firm faith in God, in that, like the new moons, they too, may monthly be rejuvenated. But when the men saw that no gold or silver for the idol was forthcoming from the women, they drew off their own earrings that they wore in Arab fashion, and brought these to Aaron. No living calf would have shaped itself out of the gold of these earrings, if a disaster had not occurred through an oversight of Aaron. For when Moses at the exodus of Israel from Egypt set himself to lifting the coffin of Joseph out of the depths of the Nile, he employed the following means. He took 4 leaves of silver, and engraved on each the image of one of the beings represented at the celestial throne, dashed the lion, the man, the eagle, and the bull. He then cast on the river the leaf with the image of the lion, and the waters of the river became tumultuous, and roared like a lion. He then threw down the leaf with the image of man, and the scattered bones of Joseph united themselves into an entire body. And when he cast in the 3rd leaf with the image of the eagle, the coffin floated up to the top. As he had no use for the 4th leaf of silver with the image of the bull, he asked a woman to store it away for him, while he was occupied with the transportation of the coffin, and later forgot to reclaim the leaf of silver. This was now among the ornaments that the people brought to Aaron, and it was exclusively owing to this bull's image of magical virtues, that a golden bull arose out of the fire into which Aaron put the gold and silver. When the mixed multitude that had joined Israel in their exodus from Egypt saw this idol conducting itself like a living being, they said to Israel, "This is thy God, O Israel." The people then betook themselves to the 70 members of the Sanhedrin and demanded that they worship the bull that had led Israel out of Egypt. God, said they, had not delivered us out of Egypt, but only himself, who had in Egypt been in captivity. The members of the Sanhedrin remained loyal to their God, and were hence cut down by the rabble. The 12 heads of the tribes did not answer the summons of the people any more than the members of the Sanhedrin, and were therefore rewarded by being found worthy of beholding the divine vision. But the people worshipped not only the golden calf, they made 13 such idols, one each for the 12 tribes, and one for all Israel. More than this, they employed manna, which God in his kindness did not deny them even on this day, as an offering to their idols. The devotion of Israel to this worship of the bull is in part explained by the circumstance that while passing through the Red Sea, they beheld the celestial throne, and most distinctly of the 4 creatures about the throne, they saw the ox. It was for this reason that they hit upon the notion that the ox had helped God in the exodus from Egypt, and for this reason did they wish to worship the ox beside God. The people then wanted to erect an altar for their idol, but Aaron tried to prevent this by saying to the people, "It will be more reverential to your God if I build the altar in person," for he hoped that Moses might appear in the meantime. His expectation, however, was disappointed, for on the morning of the following day, when Aaron had at length completed the altar, Moses was not yet at hand, and the people began to offer sacrifices to their idol, and to indulge in lewdness. Moses blamed for Israel's sin. When the people turned from their God, he said to Moses, who was still in heaven, "Go, get thee down. For thy people, which thou broughtest out of the land of Egypt, have corrupted themselves." Moses, who until then had been superior to the angels, now, owing to the sins of Israel, feared them greatly. The angels, hearing that God meant to send him from his presence, wanted to kill him, and only by clinging to the throne of God, who covered him with his mantle, did he escape from the hands of the angels, that they might do him no harm. He had particularly hard struggle with the 5 angels of destruction, Kesv, Af, Hema, Mashhad, and Haran, whom God had sent to annihilate Israel. Moses then hastened to the 3 patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and said to them, "If ye are men who are participators of the future life, stand by me in this hour, for your children are as a sheep that is led to the slaughter." The 3 patriarchs united their prayers with those of Moses, who said to God, "Hast thou not made a vow to these 3 to multiply their seed as the stars, and are they now to be destroyed?" In recognition of the merits of these 3 pious men, God called away 3 of the angels of destruction, leaving only 2, whereupon Moses further importuned God, "For the vow thou madest to Israel, take from them the angel Mashhad." And God granted his prayer. Moses continued, "For the vow thou madest me, take from them also the angel Haran." God now stood by Moses, so that he was able to conquer this angel, and he thrust him down deep into the earth in a spot that is possession of the tribe of Gad, and there held him captive. So long as Moses lived, this angel was held in check by him, and if he tried, even when Israel sinned, to rise out of the depths, open wide his mouth, and destroy Israel with his panting, all Moses had to do was to utter the name of God, and Haran, or as he is sometimes called, Peor, was drawn once more into the depths of the earth. At Moses' death, God buried him opposite the spot where Peor is bound. For should Peor, if Israel sinned, reach the upper world and open his mouth to destroy Israel with his panting, he would, upon seeing Moses' grave, be so terror-stricken, that he would fall back into the depths once more. Moses did indeed manage the angels of destruction, but it was a more difficult matter to appease God in his wrath. He addressed Moses harshly, crying, "The grievous sins of men had once caused me to go down from heaven to see their doings. Do thou likewise go down from heaven now. It is fitting that the servant be treated as his master. Do thou now go down. Only for Israel's sake have I caused this honor to fall to thy lot, but now that Israel has become disloyal to me, I have not further reason thus to distinguish thee. Moses hereupon answered, O Lord of the world! Not long since didst thou say to me, Come now, therefore, and I will send thee that thou mayest bring forth my people out of Egypt. And now thou callest them my people. Nay, whether pious or sinful, they are thy people still. Moses continued, What wilt thou now do with them? God answered, I will consume them, and I will make of thee a great nation. O Lord of the world! Replied Moses, If the three-legged bench has no stability, how then shall the one-legged stand? Fulfill not, I implore thee, the prophecies of the Egyptian magicians, who predicted to their king that the star Ra would move as a harbinger of blood and death before the Israelites. Then he began to implore mercy for Israel, consider their readiness to accept the Torah, whereas the sons of Esau rejected it. God, but they transgressed the precepts of the Torah. One day were they loyal to me, then instantly set to work to make themselves the golden calf. Moses, consider that when in thy name I came to Egypt and announced to them thy name, they at once believed in me, and bowed down their heads and worshipped thee. God, but they now bow down their heads before their idol. Moses, consider that they sent thee their young men to offer thee burnt offerings. God, they now offered sacrifices to the golden calf. Moses, consider that on Sinai they acknowledged that thou art their God. God, they now acknowledge that the idol is their God. All these arguments with God did not help Moses. He even had to put up with having the blame for the golden calf laid on his shoulders. Moses, said God, when Israel was still in Egypt, I gave thee the commission to lead them out of the land, but not take with thee the mixed multitude that wanted to join them. But thou in thy clemency and humility didst persuade me to accept the penitent that do penance, and didst take with thee the mixed multitude. I did as thou didst beg me, although I knew what the consequences would be, and it is now these people, thy people, that have seduced Israel to idolatry. Moses now thought it would be useless to try to secure God's forgiveness for Israel, and was ready to give up his intercession, when God, who in reality meant to preserve Israel, but only liked to hear Moses pray, now spoke kindly to Moses to let him see that he was not quite inaccessible to his exhortations, saying, Even in Egypt did I foresee what this people would do after their deliverance. Thou foresawest only the receiving of the Torah on Sinai, but I foresaw the worship of the calf as well. With these words, God let Moses perceive that the defection of Israel was no surprise to him, as he had considered it even before the exodus from Egypt. Hence Moses now gathered new courage to intercede for Israel. He said, O Lord of the world! Israel has indeed created a rival for thee in their idol, that thou art angry with them. The calf, I supposed, shall bid stars and moon to appear, while thou makest the sun to rise. Thou shalt send the dew and he will cause the wind to blow. Thou shalt send down the rain, and he shall bid the plants to grow. God, Moses, thou art mistaken, like them, and knowest not that the idol is absolutely nothing. If so, said Moses, why art thou angry with thy people for that which is nothing? Besides, he continued, thou didst say thyself that it was chiefly my people, the mixed multitude, that was to blame for the sin. Why then art thou angry with thy people? If thou art angry with them only because they have not observed the Torah, then let me vouch for the observance of it on the part of my companions, such as Aaron and his sons, Joshua and Caleb, Jer and Machir, as well as many pious men among them, and myself. But God said, I have vowed that he that sacrificeth unto any god, save unto the Lord only, he shall be utterly destroyed, and a vow that has once passed my lips, I cannot retract. Moses replied, O Lord of the world! Has not thou given us the law of absolution from a vow, whereby power is given to a learned man to absolve anyone from his vows? But every judge who desires to have his decisions accounted valid, must subject himself to the law, and thou who hast prescribed the law of absolution from vows through a learned man, must subject thyself to this law, and through me be absolved from thy vow. Moses thereupon wrapped his robe about him, seated himself, and bade God let him absolve him from his vow, bidding him say, I repent of the evil that I had determined to bring upon my people. Moses then cried out to him, thou art absolved from thine oath and vow. The punishment of the sinners. When Moses descended from Sinai, he there found his true servant Joshua, who had awaited him on the slope of the mountain throughout all the 40 days during which Moses stayed in heaven, and together they repaired to the encampment. On approaching it, they heard cries of the people, and Joshua remarked to Moses, "There is a noise of war in the camp." But Moses replied, "Is it possible that thou, Joshua, who art one day destined to be the leader of 60 myriads of people, canst not distinguish among the different kinds of dens? This is no cry of Israel conquering, nor of their defeated foe, but their adoration of an idol." When Moses had now come close enough to the camp to see what was going on there, he thought to himself, "How now shall I give to them the tables and enjoin upon them the prohibition of idolatry, for the very trespassing of which, heaven will inflict capital punishment upon them." Hence, instead of delivering to them the tables, he tried to turn back, but the 70 elders pursued him and tried to wrest the tables from Moses. But his strength excelled that of the 70 others, and he kept the tables in his hands, although these were 70 in weight. All at once, however, he saw the writing vanish from the tables, and at the same time became aware of their enormous weight. For while the celestial writing was upon them, they carried their own weight and did not burden Moses, but with the disappearance of the writing all this changes. Now all the more did Moses feel loath to give the tables without their contents to Israel, and besides he thought, if God prohibited one idolatrous Israelite from partaking of the Passover feast, how much more would he be angry if I were now to give all the Torah to an idolatrous people? Hence, without consulting God, he broke the tables. God, however, thanked Moses for breaking the tables. Hardly had Moses broken the tables, when the ocean wanted to leave its bed to flood the world. Moses now took the calf which they had made, and burnt it in the fire, and ground it to powder, and strewed it upon the water, saying to the waters, "What would ye upon the dry land?" And the waters said, "The world stands only through the observance of the Torah, but Israel has not been faithful to it." Moses hereupon said to the water, "All that have committed idolatry shall be yours. Are you now satisfied with these thousands?" But the waters were not to be appeased by the sinners that Moses cast into them, and the ocean would not retreat to its bed until Moses made the children of Israel drink of it. The drinking of these waters was one of the forms of capital punishment that he inflicted upon the sinners. When, in answer to Moses' call, "Who is on the Lord's side? Let him come unto me," all the sons of Levi gathered themselves together unto him, they who had not taken part in the adoration of the golden calf. Moses appointed these Levites as judges, whose immediate duty it was to inflict the lawful punishment of decapitation upon all those who had been seen by witnesses to be seduced to idolatry after they had been warned not to do so. Moses gave the command as though he had been commissioned to do so by God. This was not actually so, but he did it in order to enable the judges appointed by him to punish all the guilty in the course of one day, which otherwise, owing to the procedure of Jewish jurisprudence, could not well have been possible. Those who, according to the testimony of witnesses, had been seduced to idolatry, but who could not be proven to have been warned beforehand, were not punished by temporal justice, they died of the water that Moses forced them to drink. For this water had upon them the same effect as the curse-bringing water upon the adulterous woman. But those sinners, too, against whom no witnesses appeared, did not escape their fate, for upon them God sent the plague to carry them off,